Hey everyone, I'm Hayes, this is Almond Brownies, and here we go again. As you can see on the right here, we have one brother. Now it's time to make some spaghetti! Actually, no. Now it's time to make somebody to make us some spaghetti, as we are tackling Papyrus. So, follow this link if you want to see how Sans was made. So we start off, as ever, by laying down the foundation of the size of the mask that we want to be building on, just so we have a good canvas to work on. Because I have a good idea in my mind of what parts of my head I want this mask to cover. So I lay that clay down first and then start to build up. And I know I want this to be quite a tall and thin mask, unlike Sans was. And then as we progress, I can start cutting in some very early details. You can see a flash of a ruler every now and then as I'm trying to make sure things are even. And currently it is just a case of trying to get the broad strokes correct. So we've got the big working pieces to adjust as we go along. For Papyrus, I actually decided to sculpt in his signature eyebrow rather than giving him a neutral expression, because I just think it's more characterful, especially with the fact that at no point do you see him not without his giant teeth front and centre. I think it looks a little bit weird trying to give him a neutral expression whilst he's got that massive mouth open like that, in a way that I think it's more characterful for Sans to have that kind of neutral, slightly creepy, slightly, I can kill you with my mind look about him. And then as we go on, you can see I am making changes to the back of the mask to try and sculpt in the more anatomical details like we did with the Sans. There's a lot about this sculpt that is very similar to my original Sans mask, and there's a lot about the original Sans mask that has informed how I'm going about this sculpt. But there are also some other difficulties in this one that I didn't face with the Sans. For example, I probably want this jawline to actually be mobile, so I'm having to be very careful about top and bottom teeth so I can make sure they are actually mobile for the wearer. And to give that mobility, the chin needs to go underneath the wearer's chin so they can actually leverage it open. And then when I have one cast and made, I need to figure out if I just want black materials in the gap, and then how do I do that? Because if I just mount it on a balaclava, chances are I won't have the mobility. So those are problems for future Hayes. Yep, I will cross those bridges when I come to them. Here we are, we're about 5 hours in, and you can see I'm still adding, taking away, and still ever so slightly working my way towards the sculpt that I want. Just making incremental changes as we go, still taking off chunks on the back, taking off chunks on the front, and then I spend about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, just getting the teeth right. Much like the scales on Madame Vastra beforehand, getting the teeth just right and even and natural looking, not just like big even rectangles, is quite hard. And then I open up the jaw just a bit. It's a bit more of a cartoonish skeleton effect, putting in the digital hole size in the jaw, but I think it works for Papyrus, giving him a kind of more maniacal skull-like grin. He's very much got the whole laughing skull motif about him, along with being kind of a bit goofy. And then that was the end of the second night of sculpting. So that's about 8 hours worth of sculpting all in, and all on stream. Remember, if you want to see this stuff live, I stream this almost every week. I sculpt something new. Come and join us on twitch.tv/HayesMH. Links below. And also, if you do want to see work in progress photos of everything that I work on, I share them all on my Facebook page, so you can keep up to date with the videos that will be coming out in a few weeks and get ahead of the game. Also, it's a great place to ask me questions. And now, the third night of sculpting. This is where I get to put the final details in. And this was actually only about an hour's worth of work, because I was so happy with how the anatomy had come out. Putting the details in was all that needed doing, and sorting out the teeth just a tiny bit more. So we're just tracing the anatomical joints between the parts of the skull, and then I'm going over them with water, re-sculpting them a couple of times, softening them up, blending them into the overall shape so they don't stand out. And then, just like I did with Sans, I add some gap-filling cracks. So it just looks like he's had a couple of bangs and bruises, because they won't have healed because he's a skeleton, and it gives something a little interesting to put in the white space. And then, of course, I can't leave well enough alone. I touch up the teeth a little bit more. Then the very last part, just before we go to mold it, actually hit the whole thing down with a wet sponge to put a bone-like texture in all of it, and then add a lot of water to the teeth to make sure they have a different texture, so they're nice and enameled smooth, and then hit the whole thing up with a spray can to seal the surface of the clay so the moisture doesn't escape, and it will make it a little bit stronger when I start doing the mold making. And after this, I actually put a couple more layers of varnish and sealant on the mold just so it'll survive the mold making process. And there you go, one papyrus mask. I hope you really like this. Please share it with any Undertale cosplayers. If you have any questions, please ask. If you are curious about the mold making, just ask. And hopefully in a week or two, we'll see a finished painted one of these to go along with his brother. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.